Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a truly fascinating psychological dynamic when it comes to human communication. We spend so much of our lives hyper-focused on what we're going to say, how we're going to say it, and just making sure our voices are heard above all the noise. But what if the absolute most powerful tool in any conversation isn't the words you speak, but the words you intentionally hold back? Well, today, we are breaking down the hidden psychology behind the power of silence. So let's jump right in with a pretty massive statistic. 99%. According to behavioral research, 99% of people completely miss a fundamental psychological trick in their everyday conversations. Think about that. That means almost every single person you interact with is entirely blind to this dynamic. People are just so intensely focused on generating noise, asserting their own opinions, and basically just being heard that they completely miss the sheer strategic power of staying quiet. All right, let's kick things off with Section 1, the myth of weakness.
People frequently assume, and you've probably seen this yourself, that the quietest person in the room is just the weakest person in the room. Think about your typical high-stakes boardroom meeting or a super competitive class. We are heavily conditioned by society to equate loud, constant talking with dominance, authority, and, well, intelligence. But the psychological reality? It's often the exact opposite. That quiet person sitting there is usually the most observant one in the room. They aren't shrinking away out of fear or some lack of knowledge. Actually, scratch that. They are engaging with the room, just on a much deeper, highly strategic level.
Which leads us perfectly into Section 2, creating curiosity.
I really want you to think about someone in your own life for a second. Have you ever noticed that some people barely say a word, yet when they finally do speak up, the whole room just stops and listens? Why does that happen? Why in the world do we give so much weight to the words of someone who uses so few of them, especially when there are so many louder voices begging for our attention?
Well, the psychological driver here is what's known as curiosity creation. It's the act of strategically withholding your immediate reactions. When someone doesn't react to every single comment or, jump at every chance to voice their opinion, it naturally generates this intense curiosity. It practically forces everyone else to lean in and wonder, okay, what's going on in their head? By not flooding the room with words, the quiet person makes their eventual contribution rare. And basic human psychology dictates that we inherently place a much higher value on things that are scarce. Now let's shift gears to Section 3, the observer advantage. While most people in a conversation are frantically trying to cue up their next response before the other person has even finished their sentence, the quiet person is doing something else entirely. Psychologists note that by observing rather than reacting, these individuals pick up on crucial hidden data. They're analyzing subtle shifts in body language. They're decoding microexpressions. They notice all those little inconsistencies in how people behave when they get pushed. Ultimately, they're soaking up a massive amount of nonverbal data that everyone else is literally just too busy talking to see. Now let's be clear, being quiet doesn't automatically mean someone is inherently smarter than everyone else in the room, but it absolutely means they are operating with a massive advantage. They are gathering way more information before they ever make a judgment. It's like they're stepping back to look at the entire chessboard, carefully evaluating everyone's position and intent, while everyone else is just staring blindly at their own next move. Okay, moving on to Section 4, the discomfort of silence.
Let's walk through this concept psychologists call the conversational void. Look, most people are deeply uncomfortable with silence, right? It creates this immediate, palpable psychological tension in a room. And to relieve that tension, people instinctively trigger a chain reaction. They start talking way more than they originally planned, oversharing and rambling, just to fill the dead air. And because of that, the quiet person ends up learning far more about the other person's true motives, their insecurities, their real thoughts. And they do it without ever having to ask a single probing question.
As the research brilliantly points out, without asking many questions, a quiet person may end up learning far more simply because others fill the silence themselves. I mean, just pause and think about how strategically powerful that is. You are essentially letting human nature do all the heavy lifting for you in a negotiation or a tough discussion. The other person's complete inability to handle the quiet literally hands you the exact information you need. And finally, we arrive at Section 5, quiet confidence. On one hand, the urge to speak constantly, it's usually driven by insecurity. It's this anxious need to continually prove your worth to the room and validate your own presence. But confident people, they operate on a totally different frequency. They know for a fact that not every single statement requires an immediate response or some witty comeback. They understand that listening carefully and deliberately choosing their moments leaves a vastly stronger, more lasting impression than just fighting to be the loudest voice.
Ultimately, silence is absolutely not weakness. In a lot of high-pressure situations, it is the ultimate sign of patience, of observation, and of self-control. Really, it's the true marker of self-mastery. When you can control your own impulse to just blurt something out, you hold the reins, you dictate the pace, you control the flow, and you shift the dynamic of the entire interaction completely in your favor.
So as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a bit of a challenge. Are you going to use the power of silence in your next conversation? The next time you find yourself in a tense meeting, a tough negotiation, or even just a really deep discussion with a friend, try actively embracing the discomfort of a pause. Hold back that immediate reaction you want to give. Just watch how others naturally rush to fill the void and see what you observe. Honestly, you might be totally blown away by what you learn when you simply